Does marketing and content creation ever feel hard and time-consuming? What if it didn't have to be that way?
Join Rob Drummond,
Matthew Bliss,
and me, Pete Daly-Dixon, your ideal companions on the journey to a value-first approach to business growth, here on Help Before You Sell.
The first and most valuable way you can help your audience is by sharing your story. As Daniel Priestley says in Key Person of Influence, your story is a goldmine underneath your feet. So, on this first episode, Rob, Pete, and I share a slice of our own stories and discuss what Help Before You Sell means to us. As you listen, have a think about your own story too. Let's jump in.
I was at school one day and there was a presentation by a group called the Year in Industry, which was a government organised scheme to try and get more people into engineering. So what they were encouraging, so I would have been in about year 10 or year 11 at school, so about 15-ish. And they were trying to get people into engineering. So the idea was that after school, you would go and work for a company in industry for a year, doing a placement year to gain experience. And they announced this in assembly and said, okay, it's primarily about engineering, but they're also introducing some marketing roles as well. So come along if you're interested. I was like, well, okay, I love the idea of spending some time. I felt like the idea of spending some time in industry, getting experience, doing real work before I went off to university just held a lot of truth and resonance to me. So I went along. And obviously, I had no interest in becoming an engineer. Like, my dad is the engineer. Like, my dad's the person who can fix any car, small trains, anything. He's like the master of tools. He's actually given me a few toolboxes at different times, and I'm like, the fuck is all this? Like, I don't know how to use this. But so yeah, I thought, well, I'll give marketing a go. Like, I didn't know a huge amount about marketing at that time. My perspective on marketing has changed a bit since that time. I kind of viewed it as like promotional activity, and promoting things is kind of how I understood it. So yeah, I went along, I listened to the presentation, I went through the year in industry process. I ended up getting a job as a placement year before I went to university in Sheffield, working for a company that manufactured air filters in the town of Warrington, which, as you can imagine, is a riveting job for an 18-year-old straight out of school. So yeah, I kind of fell into it through that route. So I worked for a year in marketing, doing all sorts of jobs. Yes, writing a bit of copy. I've always had the fallback of being able to write. That's always been my fallback. And then kind of testing out different things, doing a bit of graphic design, doing a bit of kind of web design, web developments, becoming a bit of a generalist, and finding that marketing was actually this multifaceted discipline where it wasn't just one thing. There were multiple skills, and actually you were probably never going to master all of these skills, but you might find a niche. But I kind of discovered in the process that marketing was about solving the problem of distance. It's a communications solution to the problem of distance. Even though I'm not an engineer per se, that appealed to my kind of problem solving impulse of like, okay, this is the problem that we've got. We're trying to reach more people. We're trying to get this audience to understand. So who is that audience? How are we going to reach them? What channels? What so this was all kind of pre-digital mostly. Like, we did a bit of email, but it was mostly direct mail. Then how are we going to track results? How are we going to measure results? What codes are we going to put on the promotions that we send out? I was also introduced then. I went into that marketing role thinking it was just about promotion. I actually spent a lot of time managing the database. So the company used a database called Goldmine, a CRM system called Goldmine. And then because no one else really knew how to use it, in my year there, I became the guy who understood more about Goldmine than anyone else. To the point where I was the go-to guy of like, okay, we need to know how to do a mail merge, to do a mailing. We'll go to Rob. He knows how to do that. So I never expected that going into it. So I discovered this multifaceted thing, but it was about solving a communications problem. And ultimately it was about helping people. It was about helping people who did actually need our services and communicating certain things to them in the right way, in the right time.
The Goldmine is a blast from the past for me. Goodness me. I didn't know you were involved with that. That was a system.
This was before cloud services as well. So this was hosted on a server at the company, and servers to me, it's funny, like all of my family think that I'm this IT guy because they just think, oh, Rob does stuff with computers. But actually, in my brain, a server is just like a giant computer. It's a giant, scary computer with wires coming out of it that sits in a cupboard that you never want to touch. And that's where Goldmine lived.
There was Act and Goldmine, wasn't there? They were the
Yeah.
two big ones. Yeah. As you were talking there, you sent the questions over to us beforehand, Rob, so I had some chance to reflect. And I thought I knew what story I was going to tell, but just hearing you tell that story and how far back in time you went, I think my story doesn't go back as far as that, but I was in my early 20s. I had been working in Hong Kong. I was brought up there, so I had been working in Hong Kong. I'd come back to go to drama school. I got involved in the world of, and I'm going to swear here, network marketing. You said what sort of dragged you into this world of marketing. That was the first thing that I ever kind of formally, in inverted commas, got involved in that had the term marketing in it. It was with I doubt they're still around now. They're a company, they did water filters and supplements, weird combo. But anyway, so, I went along to the trainings, and a lot of the network marketing world is about mindset and about personal development. So that really kind of resonated with me and got me excited. And just echoing what you said there, Rob, ultimately what we were marketing / flogging to people was a solution to a problem, whether it be poor health or poor water. I didn't do particularly well in it. Met some interesting people, went to some interesting places. I remember going to a conference in New Orleans with my brother Thomas. We were both involved in it at the same time. Anyway, I kind of let that go and carried on with my acting career, and then came back into computers. And it was really in 2008, I think, I had tried one business, had started and grown and failed, in inverted commas, hadn't achieved the success that I had planned for it. And I found myself working for a franchise of Sandler Sales. The Sandler Sales is a global, highly regarded and recognized sales methodology and training program. And I was working for two franchisees that had a combined business in Birmingham, West Midlands. And because of my inclination towards computers and tech, it was always my fallback to an acting career. Yours was writing, Rob. Mine was always IT. What I found when I went into this franchise was a lot of what the two franchisees called shoebox data. And by shoebox data, they mean they would go to a conference or a networking event or whatever, and they would collect business cards from people. Being Sandler Sales, they would definitely follow up with them, but eventually they would just end up in a shoebox, and that was their database. So you had Goldmine, Rob. I had a shoebox.
We had the digital shoebox.
Yeah. And it was at this time that I came across something called Infusionsoft. And the reason I came across it was because after kind of exposure to network marketing, I got interested in marketing and direct response marketing. And that started my rabbit warren exploration with people like Dan Kennedy and Frank Kern and Eugene Schwartz and, all of the names of advertising and copywriting and marketing. So I was on email lists, and I remember I started to see sent via Infusionsoft or just Infusionsoft on the bottom.
Me too.
And I thought, okay, what's all this? All these people are using this thing called Infusionsoft. I wonder what it is.
And these were guys that I wanted to be and become as well. And they were all sent by Infusionsoft, yeah.
Exactly. Again, I didn't know that you and I shared that, Rob, so that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I ended up putting a business case together for Mark and Nigel, the two franchisees of Sandler Sales, to basically take their shoebox data and put it into Infusionsoft so that we can communicate what you're talking there, Rob, about solving the communication problem. We can continue communicating with all of these people that we've had some connection with without actually having to sort of pick up the phone or whatever. Bearing in mind that this was back in the day when to get going with Infusionsoft required a significant chunk of change up front. Now it's just pay as you go, normal SaaS pricing, but I think it was like £3,000 or £4,000 that you had to plonk down. And there was a training program and stuff. And anyway, they eventually went for it. And again, because of my proclivity and propensity towards tech and IT, I ended up spending more time like building out the campaigns and working in their Infusionsoft to automate their business from a marketing perspective than I spent actually doing what I was there to do, which was to prospect and sell the Sandler sales system. So eventually we came to an amicable agreement that I would leave their employ, and they became my first Infusionsoft client as an Infusionsoft partner. I wasn't our partner then, but they became my first client working in the Infusionsoft world. So yeah, it was from that point in 2009 that I kind of firmly planted my feet in the world of marketing, and here I am.
It sounds like you kind of fell into it and then found a problem that you saw needed solving and you were able to solve.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, part of the reason that I have been quiet so far is that my journey is entirely different to the two of yours, where I haven't actually touched private industry before in my working life. Like you two, I have at least been accused of being an IT person, but I've always been a technology person. Like computers have been my thing for the longest time. And with both of my parents being teachers and me being a very individual, introverted person without a desire to get in front of large groups of people, I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. So when I graduated school, I got into my uni course of Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Business Information Systems, which is these days the writing on the wall for the technology-based entrepreneur, of course. Took me about 15 years to get there in the end. But of course, as soon as I graduated, I worked in a school as IT help desk support. And so for 7 or 8 years, I skated very close to teaching without quite getting there. But in terms of how this ties together with the marketing aspect of it, I never really focused on marketing myself, really. The skill that I learned in that school, and at the time, not common these days again, being a on-site level 1 and 2 help desk support, but also classroom support to help students and teachers. Over those 7 years, I learned to make myself indispensable. And in that indispensable nature, I became the first person that people called. And so providing the value that people needed for fixing technology, eventually providing ways to integrate technology into the school curriculum. If there's something in the school that required a computer, there was a way that I knew how to do it. That was really a value-first approach to marketing my services in a school of about 1,200 people, including staff. And then I moved on to government. So still not hitting private industry. I got a job as an IT trainer. But of course, this was just after getting my teaching degree, which I said I would never do. But there's only so many times you can be told, hey, you'd be a great teacher, before you realize that you probably should give it a go. But I haven't taught in secondary school before. I did my practice for 12 weeks, but got a government job which paid better, exposed me to a greater pool of people. And that department at the time was about 5,000 people spread across the state of Victoria in Australia, where I'm from. And again, I did the same thing, made myself indispensable, provided as much support as I could with the technology and the applications people use, even so far as to travel across the state, providing in-person training, which was the main thing I was doing at the time. So in providing that value, making myself indispensable, a pandemic rolls around, we're all locked down at home, and again, I become remotely indispensable individually to 5,000 plus people. And so what I'm very much used to doing is providing that value first in order to keep bringing people back, because I understand that creating a relationship with the people that you're invested in helping. And the great thing about doing what I did was that I had a salary to do any number of things that I wanted to do or needed to do. So I wasn't extracting money from the people I was helping. It was purely just about providing the value. So it is entirely about them and what I can give them.
But in return, though, I guess that gave you job security. You know, you weren't paid for it directly by them, but it did give you things. You got something out of it.
It's a situation that I don't imagine I will ever get again. And I'm ever thankful for it. Like the idea of being able to do what you do well, that you enjoy, providing infinite value to other people, and not having to worry about getting paid for it or being able to continue to do it in a large scale organization. That realistically, I was exposed to, talking about CRMs, I was exposed to SAP, SharePoint. I am a Microsoft guru now. Teamwork and team management, project management ideals, productivity and digital well-being management techniques. You know, there was a ton of stuff I learned being in a large organization with that kind of safety as well. So I was very fortunate to be able to do what I did. And I imagine that safety net won't come again. But taking what I've learned, I am now doing that very same thing in the podcasting space, where now I edit and provide podcasting services to others. I have tended to do the value first process again, which doesn't work when now, as a solo entrepreneur, I'm trying to extract money for the services I give. It's very hard to put a value on your time and your expertise when you haven't had to do that before. So that's what I've been slowly working on. But I know it's working because I do very little marketing. A lot of people talk to other people that extol the virtues of my services. So a value-first marketing approach, even if I haven't been knowingly doing it, has been something that I've relied on for the last 20 or so years. And that is exactly what brought me to you two.
I was thinking as you were talking that one of the things I think the world needs is better educators, and only a small proportion of those educators stand in the front of a classroom.
Yes.
All of my clients that I work with on a long-term basis are great educators. They have a message that some specific focused audience needs to hear.
Because if you think about it, great education is really about transformation. You're taking somebody from one place, let's say of ignorance, and transforming them to a place of knowledge and understanding and the growth that happens in that process. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right that great marketing should be about great education to help people with that transformation.
So I got involved in marketing when I was 18, which now feels like 1,000 years ago. And I'm still involved in marketing. And I was like, is it just because I can't do anything else? Or is there something that actually keeps me here doing this? Even though marketing has a bad rep, and we could blame all of you network marketing folk for that, I do think marketing can be a force for good in the world. One of my favorite marketers from the 1960s was a guy called Howard Gossage, who ran an ad agency in San Francisco. And he ran an ad campaign that helped prevent the Grand Canyon from being flooded. And he ran an ad campaign that says, oh, great, let's flood the Grand Canyon so the tourists can get a closer look at the walls. But ultimately, the Grand Canyon was not flooded. So I think it can be a force for good. It can create this positive change. And what I stand for, what I think I stand for, is for people trading on their own terms as the fullest version of themselves in a more collaborative business paradigm. That, yes, we still have competition and healthy competition is good and so on, but there is a more collaborative approach. And that's what I think we need to move towards. And I think marketing as a communication solution to the problem of distance does play a role in that. And that's why I'm here.
So Matt, I'll ask you first. What principles do you live and die by? What proverbial mountains, if you like, are you willing to die on? Principles, values, however you interpret that question.
It's funny, you always expect a big answer for that one. And based on the way I've introduced myself onto the show, this would probably make a lot of sense. But trying to be entrepreneurial for a long time, it's very easy to get buried in the numbers and that being the value you derive from a project. But the thing that brings me the most value and that I'm using as my driving principle at the moment is unconditionally being in service of others. It sounds like a self-destructive principle to live by, where you could give away your money to everyone and end up with nothing to live by. It's definitely not what it is. It is probably the epitome of what we're talking about here, where you are helping before you sell. If you approach me on Facebook with a question about a subject area that I know well, I'm not going to tell you to subscribe to my email list and check out this podcast episode where I talk about it. I'm going to give you the answer. And I'm not going to ask for a consultation fee because you had a question and I have the ability to give you and empower you with that knowledge. My time in learning and teaching has made me realize that's what I get the most out of my interactions with people. So that's my answer.
Once an IT support guy, always an IT support guy.
That raises my heckles a little bit because I would say that a good IT support guy has endless patience. And I started with endless patience, but that diminishes over time. And I am becoming like, it's entirely possible I moved country from Australia to Ireland simply because my parents asked me too many tech questions. And from answering those questions since I was 10 years old, had enough, buddy. I did the job supporting teachers with tech questions for 7 years and got another job. Don't want to do it. But you are right in a sense that you are there to help people. You have a knowledge base that other people don't have. And the reason you're there is to help others. And yeah, it definitely drives what I do.
What about you, Rob?
My thing is logical stoicism. And I think stoicism has a bad rep. People equate stoicism with grumpiness. I did go through a brief phase of branding myself as the grumpy marketer. But I think actually what I meant was the stoic marketer. And the thing about stoicism is that you are absolutely committed to doing everything in your power to achieve a certain outcome. I think it's a very interesting time to be alive at the moment. A friend of mine argues that we've been through about 5 inflection points in human history, and I might forget some of them, but he argues that, for instance, the shift towards agriculture, away from hunter-gathering societies, the development of city-states, the Industrial Revolution, the digital revolution, or the internet, let's say. I think we're living through an inflection point now. And a question that my mate has been posing has been, okay, what will the world look like in 2100? In 2100, I won't be here. I'll be stoically logical in my grave. But all being well, my kids will be 78 and 80. So I think a lot about what kind of world I want them to live in. I want them to live in a world where there isn't endless war. I want them to live in a world where they are empowered to understand their unique abilities and play to their unique abilities and act in service of others and follow their own path if they choose to do so. I feel those are the hills that I want to die on. And whatever input I can provide in creating that world, I can't create that world, but all I can do is have conversations and facilitate conversations and try to empower people where I can. And it doesn't take everyone to get there. It only takes 15%, 16% of the population to do that. So anything that I can do to push that boulder is the light I die on.
I love that. Mine is the fact that everyone deserves a second chance, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. That just because someone has acted in a certain way doesn't preclude them from receiving grace and kindness and empathy for what's happened to them in their life to get them to behave in that way. I'm far more inclined to ask myself the question, what happened to you, as opposed to, why the fuck do you do that? And it's partly what informed my own podcast, Not a Straight Line, just looking at the non-straight line journeys that my guests have gone on, and they've got to a point and possibly had a sense of failure, whatever the fuck that means. And they've taken a zag in their life, and that was a second chance for them, or maybe it was a third chance. But ultimately, it's the fact that as a species, I want to see more grace, more kindness, more love, more acceptance, more connection. Those are the things that are important to me, that I strive to show up for day in, day out, some days with greater success than others. But ultimately, yeah, that's the world that my children may not even be alive at 2100, but certainly their children will be. And that's the world that I see for them.
I think that collaboration will eventually replace competition as the dominant business paradigm, and it will happen in the small business sector first, and arguably it is happening now.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Help Before You Sell, sponsored by Activate Your Podcast. To activate your podcast and help the people who most need you and your services, head to activateyourpodcast.com/help. If you found this episode helpful, please also leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And remember, help more to sell more. See you next time.